Well, good morning, everybody. Here's the highlights of the main pattern flow across North and South America here over the next couple of weeks. We're going to start off this week with a pretty deep cutoff low that's going to meander very slowly underneath this broad open ridge. It's going to be spreading some heat across the central and northern part of the United States. But this low is going to take its time getting all the way over to the southeast, where it's going to produce a pretty powerful storm system over parts of Florida that's then going to race up the east coast. Right now, though, the threat's going to be for the risk of some heavier snows back in parts of the high plains. You can already see we have a large area of winter storm warning that's out as well. Still some very cold air in the Central Valley of California, some dense fog in parts of the Pacific Northwest as well, but all eyes are going to be on this system in the near term. So let's go ahead and have a look at what we're kind of expecting out of this system. I want to show you some snowfall maps to begin with. This is over the next 5 days from the European model, and you can see that it's trying to spread better snows into parts of, Texas and Oklahoma, and then in parts of Kansas as well. So we're going to see how much we can get out of this, because the GFS is a bit more stingy on the snow and keeps it back farther into Colorado and New Mexico. Using the WPC probability maps, we're looking here at the chance in the next 3 days of getting at least 2 inches of snow. We can step this up to 4 inches here and then step it up again to 8, and we're looking at the heaviest snows likely hitting this area. So just remember, the European model bringing more of that snow farther to the east than the other models are currently. Now, I'd like to do a 5-model comparison for you here. We're going to look at the WPC first on where this system's expected to go. So we're going to watch it move here and then race up the east coast, and you can see that we're expecting over 1.5 inches of precipitation, total liquid, out of all of this across this area. So this is extremely wet, more than a month's worth of precip for this area. But it's the southeast I'm watching otherwise. Now, big area of drier conditions continues despite a little clipper that's going to sneak through parts of the upper Midwest. And we're going to be watching California for a cutoff low to get close enough to deliver some precip before the big jet extinction event happens toward Christmas. But this is model number 1. This is the European model for the next 7 days. And this is the GFS. So there's 3 models down. First one, that's the WPC. There's the ECMWF. Sorry, they're a little different projection here. And then here is the GFS. Now notice the big difference between the GFS and the European is happening here over the southeast, with the GFS being substantially wetter. When you look at the model comparison, it really jumps out. So notice that these colors represent where the GFS model is wetter, and the whole of the East Coast into its interior toward the Appalachian Mountains all the way to the eastern Great Lakes, substantially wetter in the GFS. And it all has to do with the shape and timing of the deep upper level low that's sneaking across this area, and a little complementary kicker low that comes in on the back side of it in the GFS that doesn't do that in the European. But I promised you 5 models. We're only 3 of the way in. So the next model I want to show you is the Fuxi model. This is an experimental model run at the European Center. It is a machine learning model. And I want you to note that it is also wetter in the southeast. In fact, it's wetter back toward Alabama and Mississippi as well with this system. Same drier areas. Okay, we have the system coming through the upper Midwest, and of course the upper level low sitting off the coast of California. But overall, it is much wetter in the southeast. This is what the GraphCast is suggesting. It too is wetter. So the main point here is to tell you that the outlier, the significant outlier in the forecast, is the first one I showed you, which is the European operational run. Much drier into this area than the other 4 models are kind of combined. Okay, thinking about that, I would like to at least show you some model comparisons. So let's do GFS on the left versus the European on the right. As we sneak this forward throughout the day today and into tomorrow, and then playing out on Friday morning, that's when the low slowly moves out of the high plains and into parts of the southern plains. It's going to take from today all the way until Friday night for that to happen. Here's the clipper sneaking through the upper Midwest. Could we get some snow out of this? We could. And you're going to be watching a low off the coast of California approach the west coast by late Saturday into Sunday morning. Now, that's also going to be the time period where the European model brings a wave to the north and the deeper wave over Florida. They're not well coupled, but the GFS sneaks the wave on the backside, helping to invigorate kind of this cutoff low to move farther inland. So look at the difference between the precipitation here just by the time we get into Sunday morning. That's also going to change the way it moves up the East Coast. As you can see, by Monday midnight, getting into morning, look at how much more the GFS has in the interior versus what the European model has. That's going to continue to race on through, just like we talked about, and the GFS is lingering. It's leaving that system here longer. Now, the West Coast is getting some moisture ahead of the big jet extension we continue to talk about. And that jet extension is still there, but when does it get here? It may not be until Christmas or after, but this is 6,000 miles of very strong winds. But until then, look at this weak flow across much of the Canadian Prairie, the Northern Plains, the Pacific Northwest, while the subtropical jet goes underneath it. And flow like this is dry across a big area. So that's what we're going to be missing out on in terms of total precipitation. The week 2 forecast shows that the jet is expected to get into California at some point at the end of week 2. And that's going to push moisture into the southeast if it stays in the current configuration. But we're going to watch for the evolution of that carefully. What is interesting is the longer range models are attempting to break down that persistent Alaskan trough. And maybe as we get into the month of December, this is the 30-day outlook, by the way, from the 20th of December through the 20th of January. So maybe once we get into the month of January, we start to open the flow back up to give us more of a southwest component. We need that to break this all down, but it's going to take a bit to get there. So I want to keep you aware of this trend we're seeing in the longer range. We'll talk about it more in the in-depth forecast. So let's flip this over to temperatures. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow. So look at this, very mild north, very cold where the cutoff low is sitting here giving us snow. And we just noticed that it's hard to bring in very cold air into North America while the pattern is persistently producing a trough of low pressure over Alaska. So here's your next 5 days. This is day 5 through 10, and this is day 10 through 15, which almost gets us to the end of the month. In South America, looking at the last 2 months of drought monitor data, you can see a substantial portion of the center-west area, but also the north-central and then the eastern side of Brazil that's been extremely dry. Looking at the last, several years, going back to 1981, this is showing up as some of the driest that they've seen. I want to show you what's happening with the monsoon. It's just in the wrong position. It's flow coming in like this rather than like this. So the net effect is over the next couple of weeks, the models continued on the trend they were set on the other day, which shows about 95% of the growing area with the less than normal rainfall, heavy rains in Argentina. That's the European solution, and this is the solution from the GFS. What we're waiting to see is, do the models actually have it right in trying to return better rains at the end of December, beginning of January? They've trended drier, but there's still a signal there. I just don't think that that signal is as strong as it could be. So that'll be the trend to watch in terms of kind of global market pressure on corn and beans and big commodities like that. But other than that, I'll just cut it off here and tell you that we'll talk again tomorrow morning. Thanks.